Well, today's guest taught me a lot of things about numbers and business and what a performa is. So let's listen in.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hey, Giant Builders. I'm so glad you're here. Just a reminder, we have a media page on our website. Link is below, so you can see all the books that our guests have shared with us. Thank you. Hey, Giant Builders. I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday, and I'm so glad that you're here with us. Today's guest is Hurley Fox. Hey, Hurley, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
All right. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I am the owner of Fox and Partners, where we provide outsourced controller and CFO services to small businesses across the country. Our typical client size is doing about $1 million in revenue. Our largest clients do $100 million in revenue. We have clients in every type of industry, from really specific niche online stores to transportation, logistics, real estate, etc. We provide services fully remotely. So we have clients all over the country, and we can do all of our work remotely. And we have a team of around 10, and I've been in business for 5 years.
Wow. So how did you get into this business?
I got into it. I worked in construction management at a small firm for 3 years while I was in school. I went to school for education to become a teacher in history. So became licensed, got my degree, but then stayed working at that construction management firm, took the business path. After I left that construction management firm, I went to go work at an accounting firm. While I was at the accounting firm, I realized that business professionals do a really bad job of helping business owners. And so I was 22 and didn't know much about the business world or accounting, but knew enough just to ask some people some questions, which is not typical in the CPA, business lawyer world. And so started to get some more clients. I built then a monthly model where people would come to us, we would do their financials, and then I would talk to them once a month and just ask them some questions of like, hey, what's your goal? Why is this number higher? What do you think about this? And that program took off. And so once I had about 6 figures a year doing that, I realized I could market it and sell it, and there was something out there. And so then I started my own business, where essentially that was the business model to start. And then I went back to school, got my accounting degree, hired some people who knew a lot more than I did, and just asked as many people as many questions as I could. So learned a ton about day-to-day business accounting. And then that grew, started with smaller clients, got bigger and bigger clients, started doing more and more technical things, et cetera. But it started from, hey, business professionals are not really helping business owners the way they need to be helped. Let's have a dialogue with them and help them, instead of just telling them, hey, you need to have clean financials, or hey, you can do this. It's, hey, we can do this for you. Give us some of your time. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah, well, back in my beginning business, our financial advisor would, at the last 4 weeks of the year, say, hey, you need to spend this much money. Like, well, that's not very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you're spending money just for saving taxes too, it's like, well, why am I going to spend $1 to save 30 cents? Right. And each business professional typically is very siloed in, hey, here's how they see the world, right? So the financial advisor who's managing your money is going to want as much money under management as possible. And your tax advisor is going to want you to save as much on taxes. And your business coach is going to want you to go to the business, right? And so it's like, well, what do you as the business owner really want? Are you trying to become tax efficient this year? Are you trying to grow? It's very rarely just a 1-year strategy, just kind of in general. And so if you're trying to grow, you're going to have to pay more taxes over a couple of years. You're going to have to do certain things because you're playing a longer term game. But very few people look at it holistically like that. And so business owners just end up going from one kind of siloed piece of advice to another without getting the help they really need.
Yeah. So is there a particular time of year that's best to think about your finances?
It's always good to think about them. I mean, the last quarter would be best because, you want to, if you're going to do anything, there are typically deadlines around that time of year.
Mhm.
So There's usually not very much of a difference if you do something in May versus August because you're not hitting those deadlines, but there could be some between November and April. So whether that's making retirement contributions or changing how something's reported on the books or making a different hiring decision or changing hey, I want to go from an LLC to an S corp this year. Like a lot of the deadlines will happen November through April. And
Mm.
so just looking at those deadlines and making sure that if you want to meet them for the previous year or for the current tax year, well, what do you have to do by the time that deadline hits?
Are there any common concerns you find working with businesses that might, like,
Oh, yeah, always cash. Cash is always the biggest concern, whether it's talked about, like a business owner will come to me and say, hey, look, our cash flow is really poor. How do I increase it? Typically, it'll be something like, we have a lot of money thrown into the bank account, but why aren't I taking this money home? Or our sales grew, but why did our profit not grow? Or how come we have all this business and I have all these employees, but making payroll is tough? So they'll say questions like that, which are indicators that cash is not where it should be, both from a cash flow perspective of, hey, you're seeing kind of consistent cash flow, and then just a cash balance perspective of, hey, you have enough cash in the bank to provide you with the peace of mind. So usually it starts and ends with cash. And we're helping business owners identify what their cash flow is and then putting plans together to increase that free cash flow.
yeah, because your profit at the end of the year may not be better or from the previous year, even though you brought in more money.
For sure. I mean, I know a lot of companies that increased significantly and their profit could even go down. And then, not only does revenue not equal profit, but profit doesn't equal cash flow. And so that's another area where the business professionals don't take the time to educate. They just want to, hey, come in, let me file your tax return, or hey, let me invest your money and I'll see you next year. And so we really pride ourselves in the education part of it. And so if you have $100,000 of profit, let's say, that's what you're taxed on. You're taxed on income. And unless you're a C Corp, that money is rolling over to your individual return. So whether you take the money outside the bank account or not, you're taxed on that income. And if you have a lot of debt payments to make, or you have to buy a lot of assets, or you are issuing distributions to other partners, while you have the $100,000 of profit and you're taxed on that, you don't have the cash in the bank to then pay for those taxes. And so that squeezes a lot of business owners because I don't have any money in the bank. I made a little bit of profit, but I don't have the cash. And now I'm being asked to pay $10, $20, $30,000 with my tax return. What the heck?
Yeah, it's like, oops.
Yeah, and then that's stressful, and then it's like, well, man, why am I working so hard in order to do all this? And at the end of the year, I still have all the stress of, oh, can I make the tax payments, or oh, I have to make payroll, or where am I going to get the money from?
Is there like any certain like numbers, percentages that businesses should try to like flow in there? I mean, I'm sure it's probably custom to each business, but is there a general formula?
Yeah, I mean, um, we use 10% as like a very baseline of, if you're doing $100,000 in revenue, you should be cash flowing, which means profit, and then also any of those debt payments, asset purchase, et cetera, cash flowing 10%. In some industries, that's much more difficult than others, but I've seen businesses in almost every type of industry be able to get there. They just have to think very differently, or they're doing something different to get to that 10+% cash flow. If you have, when you're doing a pro forma, or you're just kind of sketching out a budget or looking at next year, and you're having a hard time getting to 10% in terms of cash flow, it might not be the right direction to go into, because your margin of error is very small. And especially when you're in the small business level, you don't have the scale to make up for the low percentage, right? And so if you make 1% profit on $1 billion in revenue, that's very different than $100,000 of
Yeah.
revenue. And so you have to have those percentages, with enough meat in them to really allow you to weather storms, or make decisions on purchasing things to help you grow, or being able to pivot if the industry is changing or anything like that. If you're playing with a very little margin, you're setting yourself up for a stressful time period. TBD when, but it will happen. And so 10% is kind of the minimum, and that's cash flowing, and that should include paying yourself. So that's the other thing business owners really struggle with is they'll say, oh, I have 10% profit, but that profit is really just paying their salary, right? And so that's not really profit. That's just you moving, a salary from on the profit and loss to then on the balance sheet. And so, you would want to think to yourself, okay, if I were to pay somebody else what I'm doing now, what would I pay that person? And you should include that number into your expenses to see how well your business is really performing.
Yeah, that is kind of a sad situation for business owners, is that they're often either not paid or the last one paid. So they
All the time.
don't really make a living at they don't have a business. They have a job that they own.
Yeah, a very stressful, low-paying job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only does that cause stress, but when they keep saying, okay, well, I'm investing in my business because we're hiring more and more people, even though you as the business owner are consistently not getting paid. The problem is, who would want to buy a business that doesn't bring cash flow to the ownership and equity group? Very, very few people, if any. And so a lot of business owners get stuck there too, because they keep, in quotes, investing in their company for years and years and years, and then they realize that their company is not going to sell.
It's really hard to put all that time and money and effort into something that once you stop working, it just closes down. I mean, that's kind of like a really bad situation.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and unfortunately, most business owners start thinking about that stuff a year before they really want to sell it, and that's probably 5 years too late, because you have to do a lot in order to get a position, not only to sell, but in order to get the business in a position where it could be sold. And then from there, it's okay, now you have a good asset, but now you got to find the right buyer.
Yeah.
So it's gonna, unless you're running, a business that could sell from day one, it's going to take you a good bit of time to restructure things to get your business in a spot where a buyer is going to say, wow, this is a great investment.
So there's some targets that we should keep in mind as far as to prepare our business for selling.
Yeah, if you're trying to prepare a business for selling, the first thing that you'd want to do is see if the company runs without you day to day. Because again, nobody wants to buy a job. They want to buy a business that puts cash flow into their pockets. And so if the business owner is 90% of the reason why the business is doing what it's going to do, well, if you're going to sell it, you're no longer there. What's there to buy? So that's a challenge. And then the second thing would just be try to get those numbers to what we talked about, where, okay, you pay yourself, you're not involved day to day, you have a very good diverse client base and income stream. Can you get to the 10% cash flow? And if you're there, then you have a really good starting point to position yourself to sell.
So what advice would you give somebody who was just like thinking about starting a business?
Yeah. If you're thinking about starting a business, the best practice for business financials or managing a business is, how do you manage your personal financials? So if you have a personal budget, that's like a business's profit and loss. And if you have a personal net worth statement, whether your assets, whether your debts, that's like a business's balance sheet. So you'd want to have both of those documents, and you want to make sure they're accurate and you're paying attention to them. And if you are, you're kind of training yourself to have good business financial oversight. If you don't, that's a really good first step, is get your personal situation organized and figured out. Not only will that help you regarding some business decisions, but it will allow you to kind of practice, okay, I'm looking at a budget every month. Okay, I have to watch what I spend. How much did I make? Where did the money go? How much money do I have? What debts do I owe, etc. So I would start on the personal side. And then in that same practice, you'll learn how much money you really need to earn each month in order to keep yourself stress-free. And so then you know what kind of burden to place onto the business. Where if you know, hey, in order to run my personal household, I need $6,000 a month. Well, can your business support $6,000 a month? And if no, well, there's a gap there that you might want to figure out before you kind of start the business and jump full time into that. Then you'd also want to have a personal emergency fund set up, just because the first few months or the first couple of years of starting a business are usually, cash is difficult, it's stressful. And so if you have a really good emergency fund or your expenses are very low, you're going to put yourself in a really good position to succeed because you can weather those first few years of starting a business.
So what are some tips or advice on obviously as a business owner or somebody who's starting a business, the idea is we want to make lots of money.
Yeah, the point of going into business and to take on all that risk is, okay, there should be some reward with it. And so in order to do that, you want to have clean numbers all the time, because that's the data that's telling you how you're doing. So just like if you were to try to get really, really healthy, you'd want to go check in with your doctor and get your blood work consistently and get your weight consistently to see, hey, is what I'm doing putting me in the right direction? Because if you think by this workout plan and by eating these types of foods, I'm going to get really healthy, and your weight is going up and you're feeling more fatigued and your blood work is getting worse, you're going in the wrong direction. And you would never know that if you didn't go and get kind of the data. So the financials of your business is that data. And it's telling you, hey, your business is going in the right or wrong direction. So having monthly financials is going to be able to help you as the business owner say, hey, you're going in the right direction, you're going in the wrong direction. And then you want to be really unbiased. It's very hard with your own business, but you want to think of yourself like the owner of the business, not only just the CEO and employee of the business. And so if you're also the owner of the business, which you are, if that business is not returning to you a certain amount of cash for your cash being put in and or your time, there's probably other ways that you can make more money with less stress. It might mean that the business is no longer going to continue, and that's okay, because if the point is to make the most amount of money, that answer might not be investing in through your own business or the way it's currently constructed. And so it might mean, hey, let me pay off the debts that I have, or hey, you know what, my business is not returning to me the 7% annually that I could make, in just leaving it in the, stock market. Or it might mean, hey, I'm going to make 5% in a CD right now. That's a little less than my business is currently paying me, but it's zero stress. Theoretically, if you're in business for yourself, you should be earning double-digit returns on your money in addition to getting paid for your time. And if you're not, then you just want to, really be honest and say, okay, well, what could I do with my money or with my time? And then you just want to make sure you have the right people, surrounding you, both personally and then business-wise. So you want to make sure you have an accountant. You should have somebody who's helping you manage your money. You should have somebody who is on the business side of things, because your accountant is typically only looking at it from a tax standpoint of, hey, we can file your business and your personal taxes. It's not somebody who's going to get in there, get their hands dirty with your business's monthly financials and help you turn it around. And then those people aren't going to be able to manage your investments either. And you want different people, because you want somebody who's just spending all of their time becoming an expert in the thing you're paying them to do. And don't be afraid to go to other people, even if you love your tax preparer and you've been with them for 10 years. Don't be afraid to take a flyer on somebody else and just say, hey, look, I really like my tax preparer. I'd love just to get a second set of eyes on this, though. And typically, business professionals will be happy to offer a free evaluation. Like us at Fox and Partners, we do a free balance sheet and profit and loss review just to tell a business owner if the numbers seem accurate. And so if you were to email a CPA or a wealth manager or a outsourced CFO and say, hey, look, here's my data, can you just let me know your thoughts? They may say, hey, look, they're doing a really good job, and we wouldn't be able to do that much better, so keep on. But they might be able to tell you, hey, look, they're doing something really weird. You should ask them this, this, and this. And so, a good piece of advice that I got is have your taxes reviewed by somebody else every 3 years, because they can go back and make those amendments and changes if something is drastically drastically wrong. And then you're just getting the second set of eyes, right? And I know that's a lot of people feel like, well, look, it's fine. I'll keep with the momentum that I've been with for 10 years. But that second set of eyes may really help you either save you from something you were doing really wrong, or say, hey, look, here's actually an opportunity that we found out about. And so build a good team around you, always be networking, but then don't be afraid to every few years get a second opinion on various things.
Oh, great. And one of the comments in our discussion, Larry, you mentioned a performa. What is that?
So performa is like a fancy budget or for your household. So if you were to put your household budget together, you'd say, here's the money we make and here's what we spend money on. And then you would check actuals versus how you did. A performa is like that, except you're projecting a couple months out, maybe a couple years out, and saying, okay, I think we can do this much in sales, and here's what our expenses are going to be. And hopefully, you're talking to other people in the industry or have some personal experience to kind of validate those numbers. Especially on the expense side, you should be pretty confident in what those expenses are, because you can, what rent is going to be, or what somebody's going to cost to hire, or the cost of goods sold is going to be 50% of revenue. So expenses you should be able to project okay, and then revenue, take your best guess, and then each month refine it. So if you think you're going to do $10,000 a month and the first month you do 6, well, then change those numbers to adapt. And then you want to be projecting a few months or years out, probably 1 to 2 years, or if you want to do quarters, 1 to 2 quarters, and to see, okay, at the end of 6 months, how much money should I have left over? Or how much money should I make if I hire another person, or if I do this? And so the performer is allowing you to kind of see, hey, if you do this, here's a ballpark. And the more accurate your financials are, and the more you're checking those, the more accurate that pro forma is going to be when looking out, which is going to allow you to make decisions based on more accurate data.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to it, performa.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but even if you just put some back of the napkin math down on, okay, here's what I think I can make, here's what I think it'll spend, and then just check it against the actuals for a couple months to change that. And once you have a good kind of month down, then, okay, do that for 6 months. What are you left with?
Right. Well, that was a lot of information. I am so thankful that you shared all those details. Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts would just be, make sure if you're going into business, or you want to go into business, accounting is the language of business. And so if you're not super familiar with it, ask somebody kind of around you just to give you a quick kind of 101, or go online and accounting 101, and make sure you have 1 or 2 people in your network who really know the language, because for most small businesses, it could be the difference between succeeding or having a really stressful time. And so it's boring to learn at first, or it's annoying to learn because it's not the fun stuff. It's not sales, but it is the language in which businesses are being told by their statements, how are you doing? So emphasize it, and make sure to have a couple good people in your corner.
It's always good to have good people in your corner.
It makes a lot of difference. Either it helps you avoid the stress, or during the stressful situations, they lightened it for you. So.
Wow. Well, Harley, thank you so much. That was a lot of great information, and Giant Builders, I'll have his contact information below. So feel free to reach out to him and ask questions, or get a balance sheet review and see how things are really going for you.
Yeah, you can visit us on our website at foxandpartners.com, or email me anytime, hurley@foxandpartners.com. And I'm happy to take a free 30, 60 minutes to talk you through either your business, or if you're thinking about starting one, or reviewing your balance sheet and profit and loss for you. So happy to help any entrepreneur out there.
Oh, thank you so much. All right,
Thank you
Giant
for having me.
Oh, thank you. All right, Giant Builders, we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.